Even still, there comes a breaking point, and Michael was reaching it.
I don't think he knew what the consequences would be, and perhaps Michael Jackson's gamesmanship and some of the way that he liked to play with others and maybe even play with the media brought him more trouble than he realized it would bring.
In 1987, he wrote "Leave Me Alone," a song with a video that famously features his snake Muscles along with Bubbles. There was little mistaking his message.
Leave me alone. These animals understand me. You don't. It was as simple as that. These are my friends, not you.
There was nothing unusual about Michael screaming out for a little piece, and he found it in Bubbles. Wherever Michael went, the now 3-year-old Bubbles went too.
Bubbles traveled private a lot. He wanted him to fly, so he put him on a plane, first class ticket. Yes, absolutely. Wherever he could take him and get away with it, he would. Wherever he was accepted, then Bubbles was there.
1987's Bad Tour was a worldwide phenomenon. Bubbles was there nearly every step of the way, chaperoned and cared for by Hollywood animal trainer Bob Dunn.
He's traveled all over the world. Do you have any difficulty getting him in and out of countries?
We have to pull a lot of permits, but we do it. He loves traveling.
There were numerous challenges, quarantine laws not the least of them. But Japan was unique. It was a culture anxious to embrace Bubbles.
Monkeys and apes have a very high status. Japanese culture is all about the wisdom of the ape and the monkey. They would have wanted to see him with Bubbles. Bubbles would have had fans in Japan.
It was great showmanship, to be sure, all part of the Michael Jackson mystique. But for Michael, it was more personal than that.
Taking his animals with him was a way of him to have a sense of safety with him when he was in perhaps environments that caused some sort of anxiety. I had the opportunity in the late 1980s when I attended a Michael Jackson concert to be seated near Bubbles, and he seemed to actually be watching and enjoying the concert. Perhaps he was able to interact in society in ways that humans would interact in society and yet still be a chimpanzee.
Bubbles' stunts got better and better. Like a bright toddler, he learned very fast. He even imitated Michael's most famous dance move.
Now, there is a celebrity sitting in our audience.
When Bubbles performed the moonwalk, he brought the house down.
Let me see you do your stuff, Bubbles.
Moonwalk.
All right. You're a good old guy. Thank you, Bob, very much. Thank you, Bubbles.
But life in the spotlight was taking its toll. The paparazzi attention was intense for a human being, let alone a chimpanzee.
I have seen him get scared. We got, let's say, mauled or trampled at one location, and they just stormed so bad and crowded us so much that Michael and his entourage got separated, and Bubbles and I got separated with our security guys, and we got pushed into a corner into an elevator. I could feel him clinging to me, and he started to bark. He was a little scared.
The Bad Tour lasted 18 months. 123 concerts, drew 4.5 million people. Michael would take Bubbles wherever he could. But chimpanzees are not ideal traveling companions. And the older he got, the more difficult it became. Bubbles wasn't a baby anymore.
Bubbles, at one point, became extremely strong, so he wasn't this little baby that would slap you and can get away with it. They were powerful slaps. They could knock you out. Sometimes he would slap and everything would fly off the table. Yes, and then he'd grab the chandelier and jump and swing on it, and then jump on the next table. He goes, Bubbles, no, no, no.
Now nearly 4 years old, Bubbles was no longer a rascally kid. And a house was hardly an appropriate home for a rapidly growing primate.
Bubbles, sit still.
There was only so much a trainer could do.
Now he's pouting, just like a kid.
They become very strong. It sort of almost happens overnight, and suddenly they pack on all this extra muscle, and they get a real attitude, and they're going to compete with you, and they become very hierarchical suddenly. You know, you can't have an adult chimp free to roam, not in a suburban environment, not in a family home. You just can't. Free to roam in the wild in Africa, yes, but in America, no, no, no.
The trainers came to the house and saw what we had, and they were highly disturbed with Bubbles, the way we treated him. They felt that this was not normal. You don't treat a chimpanzee this way. This is unheard of. They're not humans. He shouldn't be in the house.
It was now time for Bubbles to leave the family home.
Yeah.
They wanted Bubbles to be part of the family, and that's completely understandable. But I suppose the trainer knew what was coming, knew that a cage in the end would be Bubbles' final destiny.
Though he was arguably the best-known entertainer in the world, Michael Jackson was 30 and still living at home. And the family compound in the foothills of the San Fernando Valley was now a bit of a zoo, literally.
It was difficult for Michael to leave home. I think it's because my parents, they instilled in us always that you're not supposed to leave unless you have marriage in mind. It's like, but no.
The Jackson Menagerie had clearly outgrown the hills of suburban Encino.
There were so many animals at Havenhurst, the space wasn't there, so he needed more space.
So in 1988, his animal kingdom in tow, the Peter Pan of Popdom moved north to a 2,700-acre ranch he renamed Neverland. And while what happened behind these gates would eventually fuel conjecture and accusations, initially it was simply the retreat of the child who refused to grow up.
All of a sudden, there are these gates in front of you. Huge, massive, 30-foot high, 50-foot across gates with Neverland written across the top in gold letters.
What would be added behind those gates was even more stunning.
I can't go in the park, so I create my own park at Neverland, my own water space, my movie theater, my theme park. That's all for me to enjoy. The star needs some space. Give him a chance to relax. He has a heart. He's human.
Neverland was the perfect spot for him, and he could have all the animals that he wanted, as many as he wanted.
As private zoos go, it's superb. He had the tigers there, he had leopards, he had alligators, he had giraffe, and an elephant that used to be walked every day from the zoo to the house. And so you could look out the window and see the elephant going by at about 11 o'clock.
Michael seemed to have it all: fame, fortune, and fantasy. A fantastical retreat to escape the noise. But happiness still eluded him.
I can't go to the store. I have to hide in the room. You feel like you're in prison.
He was always living out of suitcases. In his bedroom in Neverland, the case would be open, and Michael would wake up one morning and say, right, I feel like going to South Africa. And they'd just book a plane and they would go.
As with any songwriter communicating through their lyrics, Michael's songs evolved. Though still very personal, his themes were becoming more universal.
He wanted us to care about each other, and he wanted us to care about the world, and he wanted us to bring positive change to the world.
By 1991, his lyrics were less relationship-oriented and more political.
It is our power to change the world that our children live in.
He decided to reach out to famed primatologist Dr. Jane Goodall, a person he greatly admired for her work with chimpanzees.
He would have identified with her affinity with chimps. He would have felt that his feelings towards the chimpanzee species and Bubbles as an individual chimp were similar to perhaps Jane's relationship to David Greybeard, for example, who she had a very close relationship with.
Although Jane objected to keeping a chimpanzee as a pet, she agreed to visit Michael at Neverland.
He loved what I did. He loves chimpanzees. He loved to watch them feeding. He liked their faces. They made him smile. And so I thought, well, you know, if Michael could get a message out to millions of people who would listen, it would be fantastic.